Welcome back to It's in the Wind Studio. I'm Marcia Wilson Holloway, and I'm glad you're here for section 2 for our miniature found poetry book. Today, we are going to create a poem out of found words. It is so much fun. I just love doing these. We're also going to put the finishing touches on our tags and the whole book. I can't wait to get started. Let's talk about the supplies you're going to need today. Remember, I give you a lot of ideas. You don't have to use anything that I suggest. You can use anything from your own imagination, whatever you have around the house. This is something you probably don't do, but when I'm creating, I soak up color with my napkins, and then later I will use these as little finishing details and background colors for my mixed media projects. Another thing I have here is a sweet little bowl of little bits and pieces of fabric. There's string, threads, there's bits and pieces, clippings of old sewing projects. Another thing you can add to yours is buttons and beads. Anything will do. Whatever you like. Maybe you like glitter. You can add that too. The most important thing is our words. Where are we going to find words? You can find words in magazines, right? I've got several here. You can select words out of there. I personally get too distracted, so I don't like using magazines. You can also find words in junk mail, flyers, brochures. I also find words in novels. I know, you're not supposed to cut up books, but I do have some that have been discarded from the library, and they're just going to be thrown away anyway, so why not? Recycle and repurpose. So I take the old books, tear out my pages, and then I find words in there. And those are really, really good words. Before we get started on our found poetry, I want to tell you that these overhead videos have been sped up for your time's sake. So don't feel rushed. You can stop these videos at any time. Are you ready to go on a word hunt? You can see that I've gathered my stash of pages from my novel and I've started cutting away. A few of the words I picked out were spoke, heart, and noticed. I've also picked out some phrases. Became very quiet, came up to, after a moment. Select the words that interest you and that inspire you. You are going to want to have approximately 15 to 20 different words and phrases. And as you can see, I like to stack mine in a list so that it's easily visible. Don't feel like you can't cut words from more than one page. You might even cut a few words from a magazine and others from a novel. This part of the process does take quite a while. But remember, you want to get a good variety of words for your poetry, and you won't necessarily use every word, but you want them pre-cut. Now that I have all my words, I'm going to put those pages to the side and start organizing those words. I pick out a few and rearrange them. Glancing at the words, I look and see which ones seem to fit together. When I start these found poetries, I really do not have a specific idea in mind, but as these words are being cut out, they just kind of trigger my imagination. And afterwards, you can see I just rearrange them, I shuffle them around, I read them over and over, I mix them up until I find the arrangement that I like. One of the reasons I love found poetry is that there doesn't have to be any proper English. As you can see, I'm really spending a lot of time here just reading it over, glancing at those words, trying to decide if I've got what I want. And it's kind of interesting because I decide I like this one and then I go and rearrange and add a few more words to it. All right, I'm finally ready to take that poem and plan where I'm going to put those words. So I'm looking at the back. That I will not be putting anything on. I'm remembering that I have 2 tags and trying to figure out if I want to put any of my words on there, and I decide against it. So I've got 3 page spreads. So I try to arrange the words and phrases according to the number of pages that I have available. And I think about, as I'm reading that, what's going to work smoothly, what's going to sound right or fit together. You may also notice that I actually cut out a few words for my title. You might choose to write your title in. Before gluing the words and phrases down on the next pages, I want to arrange them, keeping in mind any other additions that I might make with my finishing touches. I want to remember that I'm going to be adding some images and or trim work around the edge. I typically turn the little words over. They're quite difficult to handle sometimes, so I turn them over, rub the glue on there, and use the glue stick to actually pick it up. Otherwise it gets quite messy and you get glue on your fingers and it's hard to handle. So then I place it on there and hold it down before I move the glue stick away. Thankfully, the glue allows me to wiggle the words until they're straight. I imagine it's kind of hard to read. Let me read my poem to you. The name of it is To Hear. Looking around, After a moment, the young woman became very quiet, noticed, came up to, and kissed the voice of a little girl. I love it. Now that the poem is in the book, let's start with our finishing touches. You can see here I've picked out a few stamps that I want to look at. I've got buttons and beads. I've got bits and pieces of fibers in a bowl. I love repurposing things that you would normally just throw away. And these fibers add so much texture and color that I find myself using them quite often in my journal pages and also in these found poetry books. Remember my stash of napkins? I think I'm going to use some of them. And I've also got some images available. When you're thinking about the images, keep in mind the poem itself. You want something that's relatable to the poem. Somebody once shared with me the trick to cutting out around papers and curves. If you hold your scissors straight and move the paper around, it tends to be a little bit easier as you cut. Notice that on this piece, I'm actually just tearing around it. Again, I really love those jagged edges. Now I'm taking a few of my photos and arranging them, trying to decide where exactly I want them and how I want them arranged. In that case, it was covering up my title, so I am tearing the piece apart and going to be separating it. I'm arranging it a little bit different than the way they printed this vintage wallpaper. After I glue on this second piece, I realized that there were some white spaces that I should have torn out prior to putting it on. So it's a little off screen, but I am tearing out those small pieces of white so that the background shows better. Here's another opportunity to put on more layers. So in order for this young lady to stand out, I try to add some green for the grass using my colored pencils. Then I go in to the sky and add just a little tint of blue. And the more you interact with the collaging that you put on there, see I'm marking up the white space around the tree, that's going to incorporate that piece and make it look more natural. It becomes a part of the picture instead of just laid on top of a background. At this point, I realized that my title doesn't stand out very well. So as in a lot of my books and journal pages, I take my pen and surround it with the ink, and then I take a little bit of water to bleed that out. And you can see that that actually really makes that title pop out. Then I do the same around my little girl. Now on to my first page. Again, what I do is play around with a few pieces. I've got my paper doily here that I really love putting into my work. I realized later, after I was all finished, that this was the only page I added that to. Typically, I would take a little bit of that and add it to all the pages so that there's some consistency. Again, I surround my words with my ink and add a little bit of water. Sometimes the glue prevents the ink from actually sticking to the page. You could also use something else to heighten your letters. Maybe you could use a colored pencil or a marker just to make that pop out from the page. On the edge of my pocket, I just added a few dots just to highlight that edge so that people would more notice my little tag and it would stand out a little bit more. Here I'm starting to add a few of these bits and pieces of fiber to add color to this part of the book. And again, I'm using my glue stick, but you sure could use a liquid glue. Don't forget, I have these videos sped up to twice the speed it was filmed at. Here I decide to go back to my cover and add some fibers. Of course, you don't need to do that at all, or you may choose to add paper or images to all the pages and then come back and add some of your textured items. Everybody has their own process in mixed media, and mine isn't always the same. So just have fun and play with the different colors and textures and images. Be sure that the glue is dry and you're not gluing the pages together as you're working on the next one. This fabric that I end up using here with the little floral print is actually something that I picked up at the local secondhand shop. I think it was a scarf. Here's a good example of how you move the paper instead of the scissors as you're cutting around those difficult curvy edges. Now that I've got the pages mostly done, I go to the back of the book. I open it up so that I can see the front and back of the book, and then I start adding a little bit of details with my pen and my colored pencils. I carry over the theme of the polka dots with my red colored pencil. Since this book is so small, it's really fun to go ahead and decorate and make pretty the back of it. Can you tell I love to talk with my hands? And don't forget to sign and date your little book. After looking through the book, I realized that there's a few pages that I did not carry over the little red dots. So to have some smooth continuity between the pages, I go ahead and add those. Those type of small details will really make it cohesive and to add more interest. At this point, I put the book down for a bit and start working on my cards. Sometimes you just need to switch gears while your imagination is at work. I start adding a few stamps and a few of the other textures that I had added into my book. Again, I like to use similar items throughout the tags and the book so that they all look to be a part of each other. Adding the ink around the stamps really make them pop off the page. This is my first time editing video for a class, and I'm having a lot of fun and learning lots. I hope you enjoy the birds that I recorded from my backyard. After I've laid down several layers of napkins and fibers, I decide that I'm going to add more texture by putting daubs of glue down to hold on some buttons and beads. Have you ever noticed on a lot of mixed media pieces, they seem to have some aged edges? Well, here I am taking a marker to create that look. You can use an ink pad that has a distressed color. It's like a really nice warm brown. You could use paint or inks, but in this case I thought I would just try out the marker, and I was pretty pleased with the way it turned out. It's a great finishing touch to help complete the look. Then I go ahead and add it to the book on all the insides and outside edges. Again, if this is not a look that you like, you don't need to do it. Maybe you want to have a fun color around the edges. Maybe you just want to leave it plain. On the front of my book, I decide to add a button and some beads. Marcia, don't forget to take the cap off. Did you like show and tell when you were in grade school? I sure did. Stay tuned, and I'm going to share a few of my books that I've made and that have been given to me. I'm so glad that you took the time to create with me. I hope that you enjoy your miniature found poetry book, and I hope that you get creative and make some more. You might want to give yours as a gift to somebody, or keep your very first one for yourself. This little book I showed you on the first video to introduce you to the idea of making these miniature books. This one is really special. It was given to me by a friend of mine the first time I met her, and she wrote a little story about how we met and the people that we knew. And I just love it. It is such a treasure. So maybe you have somebody special you want to make a book for. I also made this book recently during the coronavirus pandemic. It was difficult, a very difficult time, but this really helped me process it. The background is actually a 12 by 12 sheet of scrapbook paper. It was a really fun shape to work with, a little bit longer, as you can see, of the one that we created. Ponder the Birds. This one was actually created out of a shopping bag. I love repurposing, as I've said. This one has charms on it and little beads and threads. I copied this drawing from one of my personal journals, and then I typed up some words and passages in it. I have all these little secret compartments with tags and birds inside. It was so much fun to make. And as you can see, I've got a button on this one to decorate both sides. And you see my stamps and fun things I have in there. Do you remember these? Those annoying little postcards that come out of the magazines? Look at this. Turn one into a really very small miniature found poetry book. There's only one or two words on each page. Each page I stuck stamps in, and check this out. There's even a stamp in the pocket. Absolutely love this. Anyway, again, I'm so glad that you came and joined me in this. It's been a real treasure to do this with you, and I hope to see you again soon.